Okay.
Grandpa Comes to America by Joyce Gary. My grandpa, Gustave de Slover, was born in Belgium in 1889. In the region that it's called the Walloon region, and they speak mostly French, but there's also some other languages in other parts of the country. Well, Grandpa knew of some of the history because you see, living in Belgium is a little bit like living in the hallway of a big house with people coming through your room or your place of light living all the time, back and forth and back and forth. And that's the way it was in Belgium. The Romans came, the Franks came, the Gauls came, neighbors near and far came to Belgium. Now some just passed through and some stopped and stayed for a while. They brought with them sometimes war, sometimes killing, sometimes disease, sometimes conquering and controlling. But they also brought with them different parts of their language and their thought process. They brought different kinds of food. They brought a lot of things from their culture that was helpful. And so in 1830, when the Belgians finally were free from Netherlands, their latest conqueror, they were ready to go. They were a big trade center. They were a business center, a banking center. They had a good culture. And they were getting wealthy. But not Grandpa. Not Grandpa and his family. They were always poor. They were always struggling. Now, there were four children in their family. Grandpa was the baby. And Prosper was the oldest, and then Cyril, and then his sister Emma. Well, they had talked a lot about going to America. Everybody knew that everybody in America was rich. Everybody knew that there was gold and jewels for the taking in America. And they talked and talked about going. But the years passed, and his father died, and his mother was struggling to take care of what was left of the family. His brother, his oldest brother, Prosper, why, he was all ready to get married, but his fiancée did not wish to go to America, so he wasn't going to go to America. And brother Cyril, well, he'd already joined the Belgian army and gone to the Belgian Congo, where he actually spent the rest of his life. His sister Emma, well, of course, she had her eyes on a cute French peasant and was planning to marry him. So that left Grandpa. In 1900, he was 19 years old, and he was ready to go and get rich. He would get rich, and then he'd come back and take care of his ma. Well, he didn't have any money, but everybody put a little bit of money in, enough to get him a ticket in steerage on a ship to America. He was going to be on that ship for almost 6 weeks. Oh, I better confess something before I finish this story or go on with this story. You see, I am a little bit like an archaeologist. Sometimes you have the pot and you have almost every piece of that pot, but you have to find there's some pieces missing, and that's what I'm trying to put together and have worked on, and that is Grandpa never learned to read or write English. Grandpa barely learned to speak and understand English, and so as he was telling the first 3 of us grandchildren all the stories he wanted to tell, he would sometimes, well, all the time, flip over from English to Flemish or Belgium. And Grandma, who'd be nearby listening and while she was doing her work, would say, "Gustav, don't talk Belgium. Those grandkids don't understand Belgium." And Grandpa would say, "Oh, yeah, yeah." And he'd start over and he'd tell the same story in English until he got to the part in Belgium that he just flipped back in. So, you see, I had to talk to a lot of uncles, my aunt, my mother, and other people about filling in some of the blanks in that pot there. I think we've got them pretty much now. Anyways, Grandpa got on this ship. The ship, well, it was a big ship, but he was sent down to steerage, and it was kind of smelly down there. People had gotten sick from the sea. They threw up. There were bugs down there. It wasn't clean. The beds were all buggy and dirty, and there was very little food. Did Grandpa ever get sick? I don't remember him ever saying that. But anybody who could eat a poison ivy sandwich, as he said he did, just to prove to his friends that he wasn't allergic to poison ivy and not get sick and not get poison ivy, well, I doubt if he ever got sick. But they played cards. He had good cards, and he had a flask to wet his whistle, as he called it. And so he got through that time on the ocean on that ship. And finally they got to America, to New York City, and there was the lady that France had sent over, the Statue of Liberty, in 1884, just 6 years ago, and she had her torch up, and she was welcoming him, which was good, because there was nobody else to welcome him. You see, those new friends of his, the Belgians he met on the ship, they all got off with their families or their friends or other people waiting for him. They had jobs waiting for him. He had nothing except his excitement. So he got off the ship, got ready to get someplace, and he didn't know what to do. But he saw 2 policemen over where the traffic was. There were lots of horses and a few of those new cars, too. And he went over to one of the policemen, and he tried to explain he was hungry, he was tired, what should he do? Well, they didn't understand his French, and they didn't understand his Flemish. And so finally I'm so hungry, I'm so hungry. Oh, I'm so tired. And they finally got it. And one of them grabbed him by the hand. They crossed the street, and they went over to this kind of medium-sized house, opened the door, and there was this big room with a desk and 4 jail cells. Well, he couldn't figure out what was going on. He'd only been in America a few hours, and they were taking him to jail. Now, what is this country like? But they opened the door of one of the jail cells, waved him in, and there was a nice, clean, bug-free bed. And he decided, after the man left, he would just go to sleep and take care of one of his needs. And so he lay down and he went to sleep. Well, somewhere in the middle of the night he woke up, and there was a light in that other big room, but no people. And he looked, and right next to his bed there was a tray of food. So he ate that food as fast as he could and went back to sleep. When he woke up the next morning, there was the man who had brought him into this jail. And the man's waving to him to come on out. Why, he got up and was ready to say, how do I get out of here? When he realized that the door had never been locked. And so he walked over to where the man was, and another tray of food. He ate that food, felt great, and the man gave him back his flask with some still in it, and gave him something, paper. He thought it was probably money, and it had a 1 on it. He didn't know if one of those was very valuable, but in 1900 it pretty much was. And so he said goodbye and started off on his travels through America. He went south, he went west, he went back east, he went up north, and every place he went he was going to learn 3 things. How to get a job, and he always got one. He was riding the rails, he was taking wagons, he was doing a lot of walking, but he always got a job. He was looking for Belgians. Now, once in a while he found a few Belgians, not too often, and he was looking for De Slovers like him. He never once found a De Slover. So he ended up eventually, 10 years later actually, he ended up in Croswell, Michigan. And there were sugar beets growing. Now, he knew sugar beets. Every Belgian knew sugar beets. They knew how to plant them, they knew how to harvest them, and they knew everything in between and how to eat them. He found out that there was a whole camp of Belgians working in those sugar beet fields. Well, he got a job there, and eventually, soon actually, he got a friend. This friend was Mr. Vergoven, and Mr. Vergoven was older than he was, but nice and friendly. And he would invite my grandpa over every night for a little bit to eat and drink and to play cards. That my grandpa could do very well. Now, there was no wife in there. She had died after having 10 children. And when they had come to America, Mr. Vergoven and his wife, they came with their oldest daughter, who was 4 at the time, another daughter who was 2, and a daughter who was born on the ship in steerage. Well, as I said, she had died, the wife, and the oldest daughter was taking care of the house and the other children, and she was feeding them every night. And after a month or so, one day Mr. Vergoven yelled, "Hey, Lizzie!" That was the oldest daughter's name. She was 19. And he says, "Hey, Lizzie, come on over here." And he looks at her, and he looks at Grandpa, and he points to him and says, "Lizzie, you're going to marry Gustav here." Now, neither of them ever remembered, they told me later, talking to each other very much, but they got married on February the 14th, 1910. They got married, and we children kind of wondered as we listened to Grandpa's stories and listened to Grandma and Grandpa, did Grandpa win that card game or did he lose that card game? You see, Grandma and Grandpa, why, they just fought like dogs and cats. All the time they were fighting or disagreeing, but they must have learned how to make up pretty well, because they had 10 living children, 9 living children actually. They had 10 children, but one died. And well, they just learned how, I guess. Anyways, Grandpa never got rich. Grandpa never went back to Belgium. Grandpa never saw his family again. Unless you change your definition of what most people have for rich. You know, when Grandpa died, he had 9 living children, my mother and her brothers. 7 of those were boys, good strapping boys. And he had 45 grandchildren. That's my generation. And then he had, well, we don't know how many he had in great-grandchildren. That's our son and daughter's generation. And then great-great-grandchildren, our grandchildren's generation. And then there's also great-great-great and great-great-great-great-grandchildren these days. We don't know how many there are of those. But you know, there's a whole page in the Monroe Telephone Directory of De Slovers, all from my grandpa. Maybe it's just how you count riches. And maybe he did get rich. Grandpa came to America.